Hello, I'm Rod Dreher, and welcome to a discussion of the Gospels with Metropolitan Hilarion. Vladika, why were 12 apostles chosen? Why did Jesus choose 12 and not 11 or 13? And why did he choose those men and not learned scribes?
There is one very trivial answer to this question, which I heard from the late mayor of Moscow, Yuri Lushkov. He said that 12 people is the optimal group of those people with whom one boss can work directly. This was his response, and probably he was quite an experienced boss, so he meant what he said. I personally believe that the explanation is different, and this has to do with the symbolism of numbers, which was always important for the Jews, for the Old Testament, and is still quite important in the New Testament, as we see from the Gospels, and especially as we see from the book of the Revelation, from the Apocalypse. The number of 12 disciples corresponds to the 12 tribes of Israel. And also Jesus says to his disciples that when I come in my glory to judge the living and the dead, you will be sitting together with me on the 12 thrones, and you will be judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So there is this symbolism, and I think this is the answer why there were 12 disciples and not 13 and not some other number. But as we read in Luke, there was another group, a larger group of the disciples, the 70 disciples. And this again has an analogy in the Old Testament, because it was Moses who appointed 70 elders to rule the people of Israel when he became old and when he was advised to do so.
It seems like this is a forerunner of the hierarchy of the church. Is that fair to say?
That is quite fair to say, because in fact the hierarchy of the church proceeds from Jesus Christ and his apostles. And we always mention as the most significant mark of the existence of the church and of the truthfulness of the church, the apostolic succession. The succession which comes directly from the apostles through the unbroken chain of ordinations to the bishops of our times.
Now, some of our Protestant friends today tell themselves that the early church had no hierarchy, that there's no such thing as a bishop, etc. They believe that they are living true to the early church. What would you say to that?
There are various studies that indicate that already in the apostolic age there was a hierarchy. Now we can see clearly from the epistles of St. Paul that in his times there was no such clear threefold distinction like bishop, priest, and deacon. Deacons was a special service, and bishop and presbyter was in fact the same service for a rather short period. Then, as the church started to grow, as there were, for example, multiple communities even in one city, the senior presbyter would become a bishop, and it would be through the succession of bishops that the ordinations of other priests would be completed.
Now let's talk about St. Peter. Why did Jesus choose him, and why do we think of him as the leader of the apostles?
It was very much of a personal choice, and as we read in the Gospel of Mark, among all those who followed him, Jesus chose these 12, and Mark says he chose whom he wanted. he indicates that the initiatives comes from Jesus, not from these people. And in fact, we do not see that any of them volunteered to follow him. It was rather he who was calling each one of them. So his was the initiative, theirs was the response. Now they responded without knowing what expects them. Probably it was quite inspiring for them to be with Jesus, as we can see from numerous references to their behavior. They were generally faithful to him with one exception, but they had human weaknesses, and these human weaknesses were exhibited very often as they were traveling with him, as they were following him, as they were listening to him.
So why did he choose fishermen, ordinary men, and not theologians, scribes, etc.?
As we can see from the Gospels, it was precisely from the theologians and from the scribes that the main opposition to Jesus came. And there are different views nowadays on what was the dispute about. There is, for example, a scholarly view according to which it was a family dispute. It was the dispute between one Jew and other Jews about how to implement various provisions of the law of Moses. And as we read the Gospel, as we read the themes around which the conversations started, and some of these conversations were very emotional, very heated, especially those described in the Gospel of John. But it is only an impression, and I believe it's a false impression, because it was not a family dispute. It was in fact the dispute about what religion means, and the dispute about the ways people come to God. There was one position, one vision, which was presented precisely by those theologians, scribes, and learned people who believed that sanctity consists of following the rules of the law of Moses as punctually as possible. Jesus came with a very different understanding of religion. He was basically saying to the people that it is not the rules which are important, it is your heart which is important. They had a very different understanding of what defiles a human person. They believed that you are defiled when you touch something unholy or unclean. He was telling them that all the defilement comes from within. You have to clean your inner self rather than wash your hands, and so on. So it was a very different understanding of religion.
Does this have something to do with the fact that Jesus violated the Sabbath on many occasions?
Well, again, this is the question which we always pose when we read the Gospels. Why was the Sabbath so important to his opponents, and why would he constantly violate the Sabbath? I personally think that he had no particular intention to violate the Sabbath, but he was followed by people every day, including on Sabbath. These people demanded from him some teaching, but mostly they demanded miracles. There were many people who wanted to be healed, who wanted to be helped. And he would not tell them, well, this is the day off, let's wait for the next day, or let's wait for Monday. It wasn't his way of doing things. He would help immediately whenever people ask for help, and even without them asking for help. We see various episodes in the Gospels when people do not ask and he comes to help them. So it wasn't a deliberate violation of the Sabbath. but it was his understanding which he also explained to his disciples and to his opponents, that it is not a man for the Sabbath, but it is the Sabbath for the man.
Sabbath was made for the man.
Yes.
Yeah. Metropolitan Hilarion, thank you. I'm Rod Dreher. Thank you for being with us.